Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui, te iwi o rangitānei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Culture and Sport Committee today. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping as we get into our session. The meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The health and safety procedures for this building are on the screens being displayed, so I'd be grateful if you could familiarise yourselves with those if you're not already. There's fire and emergency instructions and some general health and safety notices there. We do have a number of presenters as staff and community today. Can I encourage you to give your names as you come to speak so that that's captured for the recording. I don't think we have anybody online today, so we're all in the room. That's good. So I will open with the karakia. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau ai te Māori io, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, homie, huie, tai kie. Come forth from above, below, within and from the environment, vitality and well-being for all, strengthened in unity. Kia ora. So our first item of business today is to accept the apologies, which have just disappeared. I have an apology from Councillor Harpiter. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies perhaps for early departure, depends how long this meeting does go for. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Apologies for the Mayor for late arrival.
That was the Mayor for late arrival. That's everyone. I'm happy to move those. Seconded by Councillor Main, a Deputy Chair. And we'll ask you to vote to receive the apologies. Thank you, carried unanimously. I have not been notified of any additional items or any declarations of interest? Checking. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. Oh, excuse me.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I have a conflict in item number 14. Thank you.
Will you be withdrawing from that item? Okay,
thank you.
Have we any public comment this morning? I've not been made aware of any. We have some presentations to come. Right, no public comments. We'll move on to item number 6, which is our first presentation today from Manawatu Jazz Club. And I'll invite David Edge, the president, to come down. David, are you coming forth alone or are you bringing a friend? I did wonder if that friend was going to make an appearance. So David Edge joined by Roger Fox. So gentlemen, David, as I explained, we are planning to move with some speed through today's agenda. So the 10 minutes for your presentation will include time for any questions. So that's over to you how you want to use your 10 minutes. If you'd like to use all of it with your presentation, then up to you.
Thank you very much for allowing us to speak. I've just got it. Wonderful, good. Basically, the Jazz Festival Committee is trying to seek long-term, non-contestable but accountable funding to secure the future of the Manawatu Annual International Jazz and Blues Festival, which is currently the country's largest jazz festival, and we're very proud that we can bring it to Palmerston North. The festival is an amazing event, and it really is, it was started in 1968, and it is the second oldest jazz festival. It employs 400 musicians and brings in musicians from across the world and across the country. So we like to promote Palmerston North as a culturally creative environment, and the festival does that in spades. We only use local business for promoting and printing, and we use local venues for our cafe scene, which is an integral part of the festival event. This supports the hospitality, and it also provides an environment for local jazz musicians to show off their talents and allows them to interact with other jazz musicians, which is what jazz is all about. The other thing that we really do is we bring in a large number of students for the high school's jazz competition, which is organised by Roger. This year we had 11 schools coming as far north as Rotorua, all the way down to Wellington. But in previous years, on a regular basis, we've had Pukekohe High School and on occasion down Burnside High School in Christchurch comes through. There are about 200 high school students who come down and show off their skills. It's a great time for them to interact with each other and to play before an audience which is critical, is composed of people who are interested in jazz and a lot of musicians as well. So it's a great time for these students to see what they are up against and exchange ideas. And this part of the festival, the competition is an education class where a high quality professional musician takes the students through their performance. Certainly in the combos and in the high school, the judges will go in and give a critique on stage so the students know where they're going and where they should go. And then there's an education class which occurs the following day where one of these wonderful international artists comes and gives a master class. This year we had Bill Cunliffe, an amazing piano player from the States, who was a feature artist in the gala, and he gave an amazing masterclass for the students and for some older people who thought he was wonderful. So that's the great thing. The festival is a break-even event. The Jazz Club gets no money from the festival. We are equal partners with the council. The council has given us in the past a 3-year contract for 35 grand, which is used as base funding, allows us to bring our ticket prices down to be affordable. Most of the tickets are less than $30, which compares to very, very favorably with any other concert you've gone to. So it makes it accessible to a larger lot of socioeconomic groups. We also provide free events. The school competition is one, but the cafe scene, which runs in Fielding on the week before and on Palmerston North weekend, and we put through about 1,500 people through that. There are, as I said, we have 400 musicians altogether. Most of the musicians, about 68% of the musicians come from out of the district. And this is a great opportunity for the local musicians to see what the others are doing. Jazz is an interaction between all players, and they pick up all sorts of skills. So it's an amazing event, and it's good for everybody involved. It's also incredibly entertaining. Any of you who went to the recent festival, especially the Jazz Gala, or even any of the concerts at the Globe, would be amazed at the quality that came through. And it was lovely to sit in the auditorium and listen to the buzz of the crowd. It was just tremendous. The vibes are enormous, and it makes a big difference. And it puts Palmerston North on the map. People, the musicians who play, may come back later as a tour, and they know that they've got a good audience, a receptive audience in Palmerston North, and that's the big thing. The students who go through the competition have justification for all their hard work. They get on-the-spot tuition from experts, and this is a skill that is going to remain with them for their life. And we are very proud to be part of this journey for them to take. I've got 4 minutes, right. The biggest problem we've got is that I got an email yesterday from the Major Events Funding saying that they were unable to give us a renewal of our contract. This is extremely disappointing. Firstly, in that I got an email which said we realised there was a meeting and that they wished us to have this information, and they rushed through the paperwork. Now, when you're giving what is effectively a death knell to a festival, you don't send an email and rush through the things. You say, we would like you to come and have a meeting with us to discuss some of the issues that we have so we can make a reasonable decision, rather than an email which says, we rushed through the things so you can get the meeting. The comments that we got were very disturbing. They said that we are a local festival, and I'm not sure where they got that data from. I know the first survey that was done last year, based on 18 people, 2 of which were Australians, said that it was a local festival. So we sent out the same survey to our local jazz club email list and got back 57 replies. All of these replies were very, very good, but the destination were surprisingly all from Palmerston North region. So when we were told that it was a local festival, if that's the data they based it on, I think it's probably not really sustainable. We would like very much to, and they said that we spent a lot of money on promotion. Well, if they really want us to promote the festival and bring people in from outside, I'm not quite sure how they expect us to do that. So we were very, very disappointed not to get the grant. We are looking for some other form of funding so we can bring this first-class international festival to Palmerston North in the middle of winter. It's waterproof, and it is something that we're very, very proud of. So this is the problem that we have, and I hope the council, this committee, can help us resolve it. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to answer. And we have Roger Fox, who is our very highly decorated and very efficient and very experienced organizer of festivals, who can answer some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anything to add, Roger? Well, I do have some questions. Let's go for questions. Then Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question from me to understand exactly what you're asking for. So you've mentioned in the past you've had 35,000. Point 7 here in your presentation shows you've got about a $25,000 shortfall. How much are you asking us for?
Well, sorry.
Well, basically what we do is there's 35,000 comes from the council, and then we, through ticket sales and added additional funding, basically match that or get close to it. So really what we're doing is we're making the festival cost neutral. So it's added funding through things like Central Energy Trust, Lion Foundation, Pub Charity, all those sort of usual places, some local sponsorship, and then ticket sales. And that brings us up to a nil balance at the end of the festival, and it covers costs, and we move on to the next year.
So you're looking for 35,000?
Yeah, looking for
Excellent.
35,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, we also rely on we need to have long-term planning, so we can't apply each year for the same amount of money, because Roger already has booked in 2 groups, one from Vasula, Montana, due to our worship, the mayor, who was over there and said what a nice festival we had, and we immediately got an email back from the head of the jazz school there wanting to bring a band over next year. Bill Cunliffe, who was in the gala at the last jazz festival, has a school band, a jazz school that he wants to bring over in the following year. So we've got all this in front of us we need to do. We are an international festival. We bring people in from across the country. We did count with the lollipop stick. Did you come from Palmerston North or somewhere else? And we recorded in most of the recent festivals, 41% people came from out of the district. So we are not a local festival.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Roger. That brings us to the end of time for the presentation and questions from elected members. So you'd like to take a seat. I will move that we receive that presentation, seconded by Councillor Meehan, and open that for any comments. But before we do that, I will just seek a comment from officers on the process that we're in here, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll get Luke McIndoe to come forward and make a comment.
Thank you, Luke.
Just very briefly, through the Chair. So Jazz Festival went through the contestable funding model that we have in place through our support and funding policy, and they were assessed against the criteria of the fund, which is primarily around economic benefit. The panel worked on the information that was in front of them from past events and from the application, and weighing it up under that contestable policy, they were not successful this round. As David mentioned, we haven't had the chance to feed further information back to the Jazz Festival with a bit more detail, but we are open to that. In terms of where to from here, there are other funding avenues that still exist within council and from other funders. And there is quite a bit of history for this event before it moved into the Major Events Fund when that was established about 5 years ago. So it's a bit of a tricky one because it doesn't naturally fit into the way the fund has been set out in our policy. And as some of David's comments raised, they like the partnership model with council as being a primary funder, and that's not the way the Major Event Fund is set up. The Major Event Fund is around a part sponsor. So if for like this, if the council didn't fund their event, what would happen? And that's one of the criteria that is looked at by the panel.
Thank you, Luke. So can I just clarify? You would expect to have a follow-up meeting with the Jazz Club?
Absolutely, if that's requested.
I think that was requested. And in that, you'd expect to explore with them other council funding avenues, and would there be any support available to them to access those funds?
Yes, that's something we can work with them on.
I think we're being haunted. Fixed. Ta-da. Okay, sorry, I was distracted. Could you repeat that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, he's going to help. Okay, thank you, Luke, if you want to step back. Righto. To comment, thank you, David and Roger, for coming in to speak to this, and recognise this is really hot off the press, but also that that's very necessary for your certainty of funding for next year, which is now nearly 11 months to the next Jazz Festival. So appreciate you raising this issue with us in such a timely manner. Having had that confirmation from officers that there are some internal steps we can take now, I'll be looking to see, and I'm assured from the officers that this will happen quickly now, and if then we have another blockage, then I'd encourage you to come back to council through this committee, or just to let me know, and then we'll see what next steps can be taken. We do really value the work that the Jazz Festival does. As you said, David, a waterproof event for the winter of the city. Has a long history here. It enables us to showcase our own talent, as well as bring in so many amazing international artists over the years. So thank you for the work that you've done, and we do look forward to it continuing with support from council in one of the many ways we have available to support it. There being no further comments, I will invite the committee to vote to receive that presentation. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Our second presentation this afternoon is from New Zealand Rugby Museum. And I will invite Stephen Berg to join us with Phil Monk. So Stephen is the director of the museum, Phil is the deputy chair. Gentlemen, you are no strangers to the chamber, but as I indicated earlier, we're taking a slightly truncated approach today, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation, including any questions. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. The New Zealand Rugby Museum is applying for operational funding for to the amount of $30,000 per annum to partially pay the wages of a second permanent position at the Rugby Museum. And I'm going to explain some of the reasoning behind that. The Palmerston North City goals, it's clear that the Rugby Museum helps the city achieve some of these goals, a creative and exciting city and an innovative and growing city. How do we turn the to the next slide here? Do we just push this button or does someone else do it? The benefits of having a second person is that the quality of the exhibits and experiences that people get when they visit the Rugby Museum would be improved. We would have the opportunity to deliver a VIP tour experience, which is an option that the CEDA and the tourism trade have been looking for. There will be more exhibitions that can take the Rugby Museum and Palmerston North around New Zealand and overseas. The volunteer and community connections, which you can see a few of them behind us, will be enhanced. Tourism to Palmerston North and the wider Manawatu would be enhanced, and we'd have obviously continuity of service with me being the only full-time employee. And I'll just expand on those benefits. Oops, wrong way. So, as we were talking about tourism, these are photos out of our visitors book just over the last few weeks, and it gives you a snapshot of where people are coming from. The tourists are coming back. They're not back in the numbers that they were pre-COVID, but they are coming. So a VIP tour experience is a high-value experience for tourists that are looking for unique and special experiences that could get them a private visit behind the scenes. What we're talking about there is viewing objects that are in the storeroom, able to show people how we prepare objects for display, and it adds really that sort of experience that adds to high-value tourism around the rest of the region, things like farm stays. And another tourism focused observation was that during February this year, when the cyclone struck, the Rugby Museum boomed. It was actually like Christmas for us. The Hawke's Bay people, tourists in the Hawke's Bay could not visit. The ferry crossings obviously were interrupted. So that showed us that there are a lot of tourists that potentially aren't coming here that would, and it also shows that potentially this could be something that happens in the future more and more with weather interruptions. Making more exhibitions that can travel. Obviously, you guys would all be aware of some of the things that we've done over the last few years. Coming up with these exhibition concepts, promoting them to key stakeholders, getting them funded, it's all very time consuming. Once we're past that stage, we then have to get a team together to design, build and exhibit. and getting these, also getting the travelling partners, the places, the venues that will show them off. Most recently, Her Story of Women's Rugby. This is the photos from Whangarei, and we've had the exhibition's been at Eden Park, it's been to Takari Levin, it's been at Te Manawa. It's booked to go to Kaitaia in August and to Riverton in April, so it's still alive and moving ahead. 2019, we took an exhibition to Japan, and as part of that, you can see there was a section for Palmerston North City added to it. We were doing that exhibition, and we approached the city because we could see the opportunity, and it was a great partnership. 2018, we took a jersey to Rome, where it was exhibited, and prior to that, and my button's not working now. There we go. Balls, Bullets and Boots, which went to 11 cities across New Zealand and had 100,000 visitors. Now, these are the sort of opportunities that we would be able to work more towards. And in the future, we've put out feelers to New Zealand Rugby based on an exhibition for the 1924-25 Invincible, so that'd be 2024-25. We've also put feelers across to Australia about putting an exhibition over there around the Bledisloe Cup rivalry as well, and we've had museums over there asking us to do that, and the timing for that would be 2026, 2027. Other benefits from having a second person is the community connections would be enhanced. Our volunteer base in 2011 was 70 on our books. Now we're about 40. Obviously we have an ageing volunteer population, and due to their time of life, we have to replace them as they move to another stage. For those volunteers, we have regular meet and greet, morning teas, so they're actively involved in the community. Many are widows and widowers as well. Also, on tourism, I don't know if I mentioned, but 85% of our visitors are international tourists, 8% are domestic. And economically, a couple visiting the Rugby Museum will spend $30 on tickets. But if they choose to dine here, stay the night, go shopping, they may spend $300 or $400 in our community. So these are the sort of reasons behind why we would like this funding. So yeah, I guess I'll open the floor for any more questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Can I kick off? Can you, do you know from your visitor book whether your visitors are here, have come here to come to the Rugby Museum, or if they're here in Palmerston North and they do the Rugby Museum because they're here? Do you have any data on that?
Well, I think it seems pretty clear that they're coming to Palmerston North for no other reason than to visit the Rugby Museum. The first 4 months of this year, there was visitors from 41 different countries. And they're not always from the traditional rugby countries that you would expect. Of course, we get them from from France, South Africa, but we get them from Iceland, Slovakia, Finland, Israel. So they're pretty much from everywhere. And we do ask the question, why have you come to Palmerston North? And they just wanted to visit the Rugby Museum. I mean, it's quite clear that we're a proven tourist attraction in the city, but also, what Stephen showed, that we're prepared to go outside the city. I mean, the international exhibitions have been well received in the other countries that we've taken them to.
Thank you, Phil. And the other thing I just wanted to ask was the VIP visit that you're proposing, would that be an additional cost on top of the ticket, or you're proposing that would be...
Yeah.
Oh, it's an additional cost.
Yeah. So that would be for people that are prepared to pay, because it interrupts our workflow, right? Yeah.
Have you costed that? What kind of extra cost would that be?
we'd need to develop the whole thing. But what I can say is that we have been in discussions with Susanna Shadbolt at Te Mano around that.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions in my queue, so I will call the end of your presentation there. Thank you both for coming in to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move back to the recommendation, which is to receive the presentation, which I'm happy to move, seconded by Councillor Meehan. I wonder if I could just check in with officers, Chris. The request is for funding to be included in the draft long-term plan. What would be the process, the best process for the Rugby Museum to engage in towards the long-term plan?
Might get my learned colleague, the Chief Executive, to confirm.
Thank you, Wade.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. We'll note that obviously in this meeting as well anyway, but as we get to the long-term plan process, I'd be suggesting that the team come back with a further submission in more detail at that particular point in time. That'll be weighed up with the other projects and things that you'll be considering around then. So long-term plan submissions, looking into timeframes sort of early next calendar year.
Thank you for that, Wade. Thank you, Stephen, for coming in. Phil, thank you also. And to all of the volunteers, thank you for all of the work that you do at the Rugby Museum. Councillor Dennison. No need? Done. Oh, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Chamber. I just wanted to say what a fantastic job the Rugby Museum does and what a fantastic asset for our city. I must admit I was disappointed with my grandmother years ago donating a leather rugby ball that was my great-grandfather's, an all-black tour to South Africa, and so I must make a time and come and visit the ball again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. No further speakers. Can I invite you to vote, please? Carried unanimously. That takes us on to item 8, which is confirmation of minutes 19th of April 2023, Part 1, public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Any corrections to those minutes? Being none, I will invite you to vote. Thank you. That's 12 in favour with 1 abstention. Item 9, we are rattling through this. Excellent work, everyone. Item 9 is the Palmerston North Public Sculpture Trust Annual Report 22-23. And I will invite Simon Barnett, I think is with us today, bringing Peter Shelton with him. Come and take a seat, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to receive the Sculpture Trust Annual Report. I will hand over to you to share with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us today. Peter's here as a trustee, and our other 3 trustees are actually overseas at the moment, Tim and Sue Mordaunt and Susanna Shadbolt. But you've only got us, and I promise no props, no frippery. He's not really frippery nor a prop, but I'll focus on, and no PowerPoint. I thought I could put up 12 or 14 different beautiful pictures, but heard you were short of time, so I'll get straight to the point. So I'd like to touch on 3 things: increasing costs of public sculpture, increasing value, which is the good part of the news, and key elements to enable us to operate effectively, and put that alongside the written report you have, I think, already. So bad news, good news. Bad news first, the increasing costs of public sculpture. We've always sought high quality works, and those that are going to be durable over a long period. So we need to be dealing with certain artists to achieve that outcome, and that's a very small pool in this country. The increasing cost when we started in 2006, $100,000, 50% coming from the City Council, 50% raised in the community, or at least that, it was quite a generous budget for many artists. These days, that's a very tight budget. 150 to 200k is probably the starting point for most public sculptures, and you'll hear of reported in the newspapers of other public sculptures costing in the millions, which is certainly not uncommon even in this country. And in fact, one of our sculptures that we paid $125,000 for would now cost in excess of $400,000 if we were to commission the same work today. So in many cases, we actually, and the one in Cuba Street, our most recent, is a good example of that, that we really rely on the reputation of the sculpture collection here in Palmy and the sculpture trust, I guess, to the reputation and the wish to be part of what we're doing here to try and get the prices a little bit more realistic and within our cost structures. So we're still able to, I think, put in good works for something around the $100,000, but it is becoming increasingly difficult. The good news is that likewise the values of the works are increasing significantly, and the net of GST, the collection that we've been associated with, will have a market value of something in between $2.5 and $3 million now, all of which of course sits on the balance sheet of the Palms North City Council. In terms of key elements that enable us to operate efficiently, I think the reputation of the city's collection is, as I've already alluded to, is real. People take us seriously. When we first started all those years ago, I had black hair. Peter had all his hair. We didn't have much credibility. Palmy was seeking to put up the first or 2 or 3 sculptures, but over this period we've now caught the artists of New Zealand's attention, and I think that's helping us. Consistency and certainty of funding enables us to carry on with a program over a long period. Support of the Palms North City Council, you good people, and the Mayor has also been, I think, something that helps us operate effectively. I think it's true to say that at every opening there's been quite a number of your elected people here, and also the Mayor has always spoken at those events, and people know that and they appreciate that and take what we're doing more seriously. And the last thing that I think is a key element to our being able to operate is the cooperation and the help of the council officers. And we've had, I'd say, periods of that not being as good as it could have been. And I'm very happy to say that I feel that we're well past that. And in the last year, 2 years, we've had a very productive and helpful relationship with the officers of the City Council. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Anything to add, Peter? You're all good?
He's covered it well.
You're making a wonderful, glamorous assistant today. Well done. I wanted to ask Simon, you alluded to the collection and there being an attraction to being part of the collection from artists around the country. Do you think there's a point where we'll reach peak sculpture or not? What does the future look like?
I'm sure we'll reach peak sculpture. There's a whole new concept. But it's a long way off. And bear in mind that what we've done deliberately is focus on the central city so that it has a bigger impact. There are a lot of opportunities for sculpture in other places. And the Wild Base work of Paul Dibble is a very good example of that. Fortunately, that was something that the city could never afford without the goodwill of Paul and Fran Dibble. And it's a perfectly located piece there. But elsewhere, we've had conversations with people around the airport, for example, and that has kind of appeal, but actually in an airport environment, 1 or 2 sculptures there, or one sculpture, as you might remember in Christchurch. You arrive there, there's a single quite elaborate and expensive sculpture, but it kind of feels strange in that environment, and I'd say that this concentration is real, but we've always got the opportunity to spread out from the central city and find extraordinary locations like Wild Base where appropriate. So I think we're a long way off peak sculpture.
And just to follow up there, are there any locations that you think of around the city where you think we'd really like to do something there, like the Paul Dibble Wild Base?
We've got a list of identified sculptures within the central city that we've worked on with the council officers.
Great. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Peter. Just wanted to follow up. We had a conversation and some instruction to officers, perhaps last time you were in the chamber, about potential for getting public input into the Trust's thinking, and just wondered if you have any kind of updated views around that you might want to share with us at this stage.
Yeah, this is a fraught topic in the sense that on one hand it's very good to get public input, and I think we could benefit from that. So we're in early stages of having conversation with the Pacifica Trust and the Multicultural Council to try and understand more of what they see as opportunities. Having a public meeting has been suggested, and we're not adverse to that, but sculpture art is a difficult area. Sculpture is a difficult area in that everyone has an opinion, and I think once we start to try and, for example, democratise this to the point of having a competition as an extreme, this would probably mean that we wouldn't make very much progress, and I'm not sure that we would achieve the quality output that other processes may deliver. So this is quite a balancing act and quite a tension for us, because there's no way that we want to sit in a room as a trust and make decisions. We don't want to do that job, and that's why we work with an outside panel of experts as our preferred process anyway.
And does that panel that you work with have experience of kind of balancing public views, or are they more used to working with kind of smaller groups directing them?
Smaller groups directing them?
Okay.
What do you mean by that? Oh, you mean...
Are they kind of in an individual client model, or are they used to community engagement and consultative processes that might give rise to, diverse opinions that need to then be considered?
I think there'd be a mixture. When we pull together our panel, we try and get that mixture in place. The panels are always different depending on perhaps the artist group that we're dealing with at the time, and maybe even the site.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are no further questions, so thank you, Simon and Peter, for coming in today. If you want to take a seat back in the gallery, then I will open this up for any comments. So I'm happy to move that we receive the Public Sculpture Trust Annual Report, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Thank you very much. Opening that for comments. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly say that I was a bit critical of the Public Sculpture Trust in my election campaign. And Peter had some nice words with me at a party one night. And I certainly seen the error of my ways. And I'm not too big
Councillor, I will just remind you that this meeting is being recorded.
I realise that. And I just wanted to say thank you for all you do in the city, and look forward to attending the next one as well.
Kia ora. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, sorry I was a little late, just dealing with some urgent council business, but I did catch the tail end of this and just want to acknowledge the Trust for the great work that they do. They're often the whipping organisation, they're the first to get cut, but actually imagine if we didn't have all of that public art in our city, because the city's actually done very little by ourselves. We've based our contribution has been via this organisation, and then they sometimes, well, they more than double it, sometimes triple, and the odd occasion quadruple the money that we put in, and then they vest it all back to the city. So I think it's actually, as a model, it's very, very good. Just on some questions around the public being involved, having been in the art sector or industry as my career, public competitions don't actually have good outcomes. I'm thinking of public logos. You end up with a very compromised situation. That may be okay when the city is putting in 100% of the money, but in this case, we are the small partner in this. So I'd just be erring on the side of caution of trying to do a big public meeting and decide what the sculpture is going to be, where it's going to be. You can imagine the mayhem. It would make a couple of our last debates at council look quite easy. So just want to thank the trust. They do a lot of work behind the scenes which we don't even know about. The latest set of sculptures there in Cuba Street, which a lot of us were at, I think was fantastic, and there was a bit of wow factor when they were unveiled. And I just go around the city and just look at what we've got. Just been in Christchurch recently and just saw what that city's done, remembering they've had a long, mature, more history than we have, but we're catching up, and a big part of that is because of the people that have invested in this. So it ain't broke, so I don't think we should be trying to fix it. Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I'd better just clarify a couple things given some of the comments. Have never, and am certainly at this stage not suggesting that we take a full community competition approach to this. That was never the thinking. The thinking was to provide some opportunity for broader conversations, and it sounds like some of that's already underway and within the comfort zone of the Trust, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and certainly support them in that initiative as they continue to evolve their thinking and their relationship, not just with council, but with some of the key stakeholder groups in the community.
Thank you. So to wrap up, I'll echo the Mayor's thanks back to the Sculpture Trust for the work that you do, mostly behind the scenes, popping up to unveil your latest gorgeous creations. I'm really encouraged to hear about the relationships that you're developing. There's been a long-standing, growing relationship with Rangitane, I know, but to hear about that connection into our Pacifica community and into our multicultural community as well is really encouraging in grounding your work in the expression of community that our community wants to see. I think that's really positive. You mentioned, Simon, in your talk, the cost and value proposition, and I think it's easy to sometimes know the cost of everything and the value of nothing, and you brought that home even by saying, yeah, my maths, I think we're about $750,000 in from council, but to deliver a portfolio of works which is sitting at a value of around $2.5 million. So even on the numbers, there's value here that goes well beyond council's cost, and we do thank you for that. But the value of sculpture goes well beyond the amount of money that's sitting on our balance sheets, and just in terms of the stories that you're telling in the public space, that's really valuable as well, and I'm grateful for it. And I just want to note, I was reading in the Cura magazine a few months ago, and there was an article about public sculpture, so it caught my eye. And one of their comments was about surprising public sculpture collections. And then in brackets it said, "Looking at you, Palmy." And I thought, there you go. We're being noted for what we're achieving in our public space, and that is in very great amount down to the work of the Public Sculpture Trust. So thank you so much for that. And on that note, I will ask you to vote to receive the annual report. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, item 10, staying with the theme, is ongoing funding arrangement options for Palmerston North Public Sculpture Trust. And I'll invite Anton Carter, Group Manager, Community Services, to come and present the report. Thank you, Anton. Over to you.
Talofa lava, whio mai. Lo whiunga, Madam Chair, e te rangatira tēnā koutou katoa. I'm sorry I don't have a glamorous assistant with me today. It's very nice to be here. I'll take the paper as read and just provide a very, very brief summary. There's two main elements to the memorandum, ongoing funding arrangement options that we looked into, and also public input around the type and location. In terms of external funding options, which is outlined in point 3 of the memorandum, none of the options were seen to be secure ongoing funding arrangements, and that was purely down to the contestable nature of the funding, which means it was, would be difficult to be able to plan for. Creative New Zealand would be the obvious option in terms of being the national arts funder, which is outlined in point 3.5. But again, to be successful, the project would need to be consistent with the public arts strategy, which we currently don't have and is in development, and it will also need some sort of formal financial commitment in terms of meeting the criteria. In terms of location, as we just heard, the CBD has been really the main focus for the Trust. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of context around the valuation of public art. We have an art register, and the valuations are based on replacement as opposed to market value. We have 228 items on our art register. The total valuation is $7,347,000. We have 11 sculptures on the art register from the Sculpture Trust, and the total valuation is $1,377,000. So basically, for a $50,000 investment, what the return is $125,000. There are a couple, just noting, there are a couple of sculptures that aren't on the register. We do the evaluation every 5 years, so the ones that aren't will be included, and we're due to do that, look at that in July 2024. And finally, I would just like to note point 2.6, where reference in the memorandum, where it references the public art policy. That was meant to come to this meeting, but has been deferred till September. So apologise for that point. You obviously can't read it in collaboration with the memorandum. And also, I'd just like to note, while we're talking sculptures, outside in Te Maraeohini, there are the prime sculptures, which were created in 2000, and there's 10 of those sculptures, and I think it's a really good example of public art from diverse communities. Features Māori artists and artists from Samoa, Solomon Islands, Cook Islands, Fiji, Tonga, Japan and England. Sometimes they're a little bit overlooked in terms of the whole range and collection that we have here in Palmerston North. So thank you, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Anton. There's a question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Anton. I'm sort of a little bit lost, and I think a couple of other councillors are as well. We either fund the Sculpture Trust or we don't. Are you suggesting that we fund it from a government application?
No. I'm suggesting status quo.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that we do anything else. Part of, I suppose, the memorandum was looking at what funding options are out there if they did need to look at other funding options.
So is this for the Trust to look at other options?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure that's entirely clear. And obviously you've identified Creative New Zealand, public trusts, external funding. Don't they already do that?
The Trust, you mean?
Yes.
I think it's a mix, of donor support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still a little bit lost, but that's fine. That's my issue. Who did your numbers? Because the numbers quoted just before you were considerably different. And I've just done my math, and the numbers that you've valued these sculptures at don't even cover the cost of the... have we got the right valuer, or have we missed something?
I've taken the numbers from our art register.
Right. Is that correct?
My understanding it is correct. The last valuations were done in July 2019.
Okay.
If I could clarify, Mr. Mayor, I think the basis of valuation is different between the figures quoted. Anton was quoting replacement value for insurance purposes,
yes.
Whereas I think when Simon presented, he talked about the cost to contract that work now. So he was reflecting on the rising cost of acquiring the work.
Right. So you're just quoting the value of what the city put in and what the trust put in to get the thing done at the time?
No, with the art register, we had an independent valuer to give us the value for the replacement of each of the items.
Mm.
So we have 11 sculptures. The total value from the valuation was 1.3 million.
Right.
And then we put in 50,000. So there was 11 sculptures on the art register.
Mm.
So it was 11 divided by the 1.3.
Yep.
So per sculpture, in terms of the valuation, is 125,000.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not meant to reflect the cost or the actual market value.
Yep.
It's purely just based upon value for replacement that we've done through this
Because some of them
process.
actually cost more than that.
Yes.
Yeah, they cost more than the replacement value. They actually, some of them were up 200,000, and yet we're going to replace them at 130. I just don't think the numbers add up, but that's fine. Again, my issue. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification, please. Page 35, number 5, point F. The annual budget program 2130 Heritage Advisory Panel support the delivery. What's that? Right. Apologies.
We're in the next report. Sorry, Councillor Arnott, was there a question or? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Next door. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks, Anton. Just a question. The MOU expires April next year. Do we have a plan in terms of what we think it's going to look like going forward from there?
Used to be an opportunity for us to sit down with the Trust and have a look at how to carry on with the MOU.
So are we doing any kind of positioning for that now? Or that's a future conversation?
Future conversations.
Thank you, Anton. Cheers. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Last question for me, I think. When we've requested this report, I think the driver behind it was recognising what the Mayor alluded to as the whipping organisation, of recognising that we have the Public Sculpture Trust as a line item in our budget, which brings a certain amount of political manoeuvring, maybe sometimes. Was there any consideration given in putting this report together as to whether treating the Sculpture Trust as a line item in the budget was the only way that it could be dealt with, or the right way, or was that outside the scope?
Slightly outside the scope, but I think, as the memorandum says, the current arrangement is probably the best arrangement in terms of delivering to the strategic outcomes.
Thank you, Anton. No further questions. So the resolution in front of us is to receive the memorandum titled Ongoing Funding Arrangement Options for Palmerston North Public Sculpture Trust, presented to the Culture and Sport Committee on 28 June 23, noting that Council's public art policy is currently under development, and to direct the Chief Executive to support the Trust to gather ongoing public input. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Councillor Meehan. Opening that for any comments. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just if we could go to 5, conclusion 5.1, I think I was struggling with the report a little bit, just to understand what it was all about. But my colleague next to me has pointed to me where I should be looking at. And in the conclusion, I think it is around maintaining the current funding arrangement and memorandum of understanding with the Trust. And although it expires in April 2024, like Councillor Hancock, I mean, trustees come and go, and some of it's around confidence. And if I can be really brutally honest, we haven't been a great partner at times, and we need to give this organisation some surety. So I know that comes in the LTP discussions, but just want to signal that if we want to have a partner, we need to treat the partner with a bit of respect. So I would like to think that we take that officer advice, and that we keep progressing that re-signing of an MOU, and continue the good work that the Trust's done, and actually that the city really benefits from. So I'm happy to support these. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we vote on this, I'd say thank you to officers for bringing the report back. It is unfortunate that it didn't sit alongside the public art policy, because I do think these two things have to speak to each other, and I'm hoping that the Public Sculpture Trust are being involved in the development of that public art policy. If for no other reason, that having that public art policy would seem to open a door to us to be able to work with the Trust and possibly with Creative New Zealand if we find an opportunity for a large piece that might be beyond the scope of the Trust, but Creative New Zealand might be interested in. But we can't step into that without a public art policy, so we need to make sure those things speak to each other. And also wanted to note, as Simon said in his presentation, that relationships with officers are substantially better in the last couple of years than they have been before. So thank you to officers for being a good partner in that sense. I will invite you to vote. Thank you. Carried unanimously. We will move to item 11, which is the annual progress report on heritage themes in council programmes 2022-23, and presented by Keegan Aplin-Thane, Senior Planner, with Linda Moore, Manager from the City Library. Over to you, Keegan and Linda. Thank you.
Ahi Marie. My name is Keegan Aplin-Thane, Senior Planner in our Strategy and Planning Unit, and with me I've got Linda Moore, the Manager of City Libraries. What you have in front of you is a generally a for information report. It's an annual report we prepare in response to a plan action in the Arts and Heritage Plan, acknowledging it had been increased in scope from military heritage progress as far as council programs to all things heritage as far as council programs. So I won't go line by line through the report in the essence of time, trying to save the committee the pain. But I'll just go through a couple of changes that we've made since the last report, and then hand over to Linda for any commentary about any functions that she manages. In previous years, it's been very much what we did in the weekend type of report, what we've sought to do, and we're happy to take advice on the level of detail or the way that this report's prepared for upcoming years is we've sought to increase add a section on any current limitations to advancing our heritage outcomes, and also upcoming heritage-themed activities. Just want to acknowledge that this is just scratching the surface in terms of heritage outcomes that are being achieved across the city. This is just what we do. There's many of our partner groups, some of those in the room, which we very much value our partnership with, that achieve much more than just what we do as well. So I'll hand over to Linda.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I just want to acknowledge before I start the City Library team, particularly the Heritage team, the Palmerston North Heritage Trust, Palmerston North Defence Heritage Advisory Group, then Histories of Pāmutana, Te Manawa, and the Heritage Community of Palmerston North organisations, groups and individuals. This year we reset Local History Week 2023 to be the first week of March. So we've positioned it to lead into the first Heritage Month for the city. So we decided to test the waters and leap into the fray, so to speak. Why did we do this? I positioned our Heritage Month to flow on from Waitangi Day, our Bicultural Foundation, off the back of Festival of Cultures, which references our multicultural city, and it also takes advantage of the fact we actually have much better weather in March, and so we can get outside and do a lot more outdoor programming. It's also, the extended month is bookmarked by Anzac Day, which also acknowledges the defence heritage of the city. So we wanted to take a look at, through this first Heritage Month, we aspired to look at our history through the layered lenses of whenua, land, awa, our river, mana whenua, rangatane, partnerships, settlement, city development, the big decisions that have influenced our city, of which you now are currently part, and consider our architecture, art, performance and expressions of culture. We wanted to celebrate this unique local history and acknowledge those who have been part of our journey, those that made things possible, those that supported others, our innovators, trailblazers, rule breakers and hard workers, those who led the way and encouraged others to do otherwise. Asking us what does it mean to be a Palmerstonian in 2023 and beyond. So our program kicked off, we did the best that we could, we wrangled everybody that we could, everyone willingly stepped into standing up our first ever Heritage Month for the city. We have aspirations to do a lot more and we know we have support here. Of particular highlight was Manawatu, Meander to the Source to the Sea, guided by then Histories of Pāmutana, which was a day-long tour with Pūrākau along Te Awa o Manawatu. Also held in the Heritage Month was our third Kamua Kamuri Expo, where heritage groups and historians offered resources and information to give teachers the tools to be able to teach the curriculum. And I'd just like to acknowledge, it's not an exclusive list here, the New Zealand Rugby Museum, Te Awaho Newestrom, Massey University, MavTech, again, Palmerston North Heritage Trust, PNDHAG, the Regent, Keisha Birch, Hoffman Kiln and the Power Station, the Manawatu Journal of History and Te Pai Matauranga o Rangatane. So I'd also like to highlight the development work underway to increase the capacity of Manawatu heritage for our collections, and this will enable Manawatu heritage to be a one-stop shop for our archival and heritage collections and provide the ability to search council and community archives at the same time. It'll be an invaluable resource for researchers in the future. So just to quickly sum up, today's stories are tomorrow's heritage. The work in this space captures stories of generations, the who, the why, the what, and the when, and as a taonga, both for the generations to come and for future researchers. And if I may be cheeky enough, I just might sort of blatantly poach the cost to value kōrero. There is a cost to doing this work, but the value is infinite. And if we don't capture it now, we've lost it forever. Thank you.
Thank you both. I will open for questions, starting with the Mayor.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't mean to dominate, but if others feel free to get involved.
Oh, they are getting in behind.
Keegan, are we going to appoint a heritage planner or at least a 0.5 or something in that role? Because we've been a bit absent as a city in that space. And I know there was a program put to the LTP, but it was sort of a much bigger program with a whole lot of bells and whistles on it. Is there anything in the coming space around that, or are you going to hold that fort for a while?
I suppose the direction that's been set to me is I hold the fort until there's a fort that's otherwise resourced. We're lucky that the heritage sector is so organised, so they do make it easy for me. I suppose some of our existing material, marketing material for what we do, what we are able to provide and promote is already there, so we're not starting from scratch. It does just mean, as you'll note from probably some of the first table, we're not able to advance maybe some of the plan actions that we otherwise would have.
Well, that's where I'm going. It's a lot of the work, if you look at some of the stuff that's being done, has actually been, excluding the library team, and not all libraries do this work, by the way. We're lucky that we've got such a great resource in-house. Most of it's done externally by other groups, so there's an absence of the city looking after its heritage, and it's only when it's gone that, and I think Linda gave the value to that. So, yeah. I'm probably sorry, I'm going into comments. Just one more question. Linda, is there plans for a wider group to get involved in that Heritage Month? I mean, it's been done very ably and capably by your team, but I look at and I look at the plans that you have, and you mentioned around Manawatu Heritage, the web and the apps there, the archive. But is there plans to get more involved like others have done?
Yes, there definitely is an aspiration to do that, and I suppose what we would like to do is bring something back here to Chamber. There'll also be an approach potentially through the 10-year plan to get some funding for that specific outcome. So we just wanted to get started, and yes, we do believe there's a heck of a lot that we can do in this space, and we need others, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example, Wanganui is one, and we all look to Wanganui being a bit more heritage orientated, but I think we're equal, if not larger, in that sense. So they actually do a lot externally, which doesn't cost the council. So yeah, I wonder if that's an option too.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Ballin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both. I'm just looking at page 35 and point E there, talking about the physical facility for archive collections no longer being fit for purpose. Just wondering how long that's been the case, or what would be needed to make that fit for purpose.
Unfortunately, it would have been great to have got to the earthquake-prone building paper this morning. So I would like to defer some of the answers to come through that paper, if I may. There has been a number of programs in previous 10-year plans looking to help expand that space. I think the concept that physical items will cease to keep coming into archives is probably a misnomer, because we're getting more and more community archives coming in through the door. We are in a tight spot at the minute. We don't have a future for the Central Library. That's been decided, so we're in a holding pattern. So I think that we're doing the best we can with what we've got. We had to move collections from out of the basement of the CAB due to leaks. Leaks is our, nemesis at the present across a number of our facilities. So what I'd like to do is probably get some decisions made in and around what the future looks like, and then we will uphold best practice in that space in terms of conditions, size, shelving type, and all of those things.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have woken up. So page 35, number 5, point F, along the same lines as the Mayor, the Heritage Advisory Panel wasn't approved for funding 22-23. Did that purely come down to the money?
My understanding was yes.
Right, and that would have to be placed to the next annual budget? It wouldn't just kick on again?
I think what that would need to come through is in the next long-term plan deliberations, and I think there would need to be some definitions around what that Heritage Panel would be looking to do and support across the city, what Lincolns we would have as council officers, and what we would have across the wider heritage network in the city.
Fantastic. Thanks for that clarification, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, some of the, I think we've been asking sort of questions sort of kind of around my thinking on this, really. But, yeah, under Section 5 there is a number of barriers to advancing our heritage goals, and there's vandalism, no city archivists, backlog of community archives, increased demand, physical space, no heritage advisory panel. Do we actually have an understanding of sort of the funding gap that might exist there at this point in time?
I'll speak to the backlog of community archives, if you like. We just had to move those, so we know how many there are. We have 13 pallets, about 1.5 metres high, of physical items that need to be processed and brought into the collection. That work gets done mainly through assessment, through an archivist lens, but also needs to have some physical processing. Then it needs to have physical shelves that they need to go on. The backlog of our digitised items, we currently have 2.53 terabytes of masters on the Manawatu Heritage platform. Currently we've got digitised items waiting to be described, so that's the metadata from the primary source, and it's also all a captioning of 8.9 terabytes. So what 8.9 terabytes equates to is 2.2 million photos. 250,000 photos taken with a 12 megapixel camera, plus 500 hours of HP video, or 6.5 million pages. So the gap is widening. Part of that is due to some resourcing constraints, but it's also in the actual physical and the digital storage capacity we currently have. So just speaking to that particular backlog issue, it's not just physical, it's also digital.
And then for, I suppose, to talk to some of the other items on there, some of them are hard to predict, obviously vandalism and the likes, but we are preparing that Arts and Memorials Asset Management Plan to properly acknowledge the hit that we take with respect to vandalism. For 5A, in terms of program budgets, in terms of how does our infrastructure recognise heritage values, we've already got some existing precedent with respect to a number of our parks projects, particularly along the Awa. We've also got a number of costs put together through some of our current projects as far as Streets for People, Featherston Street, and a number of other projects which we may retrofit into to give us a general idea of what that could look like, acknowledging though that it takes a different form with every project, and sometimes it's a case of just changing the type of material to acknowledge a certain history, or it might be as overt as interpretive signage.
I'm not sure whether I really should have asked the question, really. Madam Chair, I just wondered whether or not we should actually put a recommendation through to refer this particular elephant to the long-term plan for a broader consideration, perhaps. If I can have a seconder for that.
I would certainly second that if you want to write something up, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing exploring Section 5, if we might. Just trying to understand, I guess, how we came to the position of, if I've read it correctly, not having a dedicated city archivist, and kind of what the context is there, what the implications are.
Okay. Up until 2012, we had a dedicated city archivist. At that particular time, there was a restructure and a reallocation of hours, and we were lucky in the sense that the team leader role and the city archivist role were combined, and the successful candidate for that was Leslie Courtney, who was previously the city archivist. Where we currently are now, Leslie would probably say that that decision did not allow the best to be delivered through having to split the capacity across those two roles. So that's how that has happened. Leslie's just retired. We have a new heritage team leader. The work of the heritage team sits across, it's a little bit, sits across multiple plans and so budgets. So we're asking to have consideration to put up a business plan with our senior leadership to work through what a city archivist looks like. The reason we'd like that is there's changing best practice, professional standards, and we also need to mitigate the risk for council for legal responsibilities. We also need to understand the importance of Māori digital sovereignty across the taonga in our collections. That's a growing piece of work for everybody involved in this space, and we sort of need to have someone who's skilled in both those areas, and potentially that the getting out there and connecting with the community to actively acquire rather than have them come through to us, because that need to capture, people are clearing out organisations and other things, and we have the tools to help those things be saved and digitised and kept so that they're there for the future. But a city archivist is critical in that space.
Would comparable cities in New Zealand have city archivists as a complete role?
Yes, they do. If I just give you a quick example, Massey University's got two themselves, and Hamilton Libraries, who are slightly bigger than us, they have 5 FTE roles in their heritage team, including an archivist, and they work alongside mana whenua up there in an active space. So we are sort of slightly behind where we need to be for our size and what we do.
Thanks. And I was trying to wrap my head too around kind of some of the numbers that you're responding to Councillor Hancock with, in terms of like numbers in the millions and the teras and that kind of stuff. Have we got any estimated kind of time, like how many FTE over how many years to kind of get us through that backlog?
That'd be an exercise that we'd need to do, Councillor Barrett.
Right. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock, your additional recommendation has just received a little tweaking, if you want to just have a check of that. I just had a couple of questions of detail, probably for you, Keegan. The Ngātoa sculpture says it's lost its proposed location. I was under the impression that that whole programme was at least under consideration. Can you just clarify?
If I can just refer to another officer, if that's okay.
I'm happy to have that come separately if that's not easy to answer in the chamber.
Kia ora koutou, Gillian Tasker, Takoinga, Arts Advisor, Palmerston North City Council. Ngātoa o Manawatu, it was destined to go up onto the pathway to Linton. Unfortunately, during the heavy rain last year, that pathway fell into the river. We are attempting to contact the artists again, and they have also been waiting to hear from the National RSA Committee, who were potentially going to offer them some funding support. We are still in contact with them.
Okay. Thank you, Gillian. That's better than I thought. And the other question, Keegan, there's long been an aspiration towards at least interpretive signage for heritage on Cuba Street. And I know the Defence Heritage Group were advised over many years that that might, maybe be delivered. Is there any likelihood of that now?
Budgets permitting, yes.
So budgets permitting, is there a timeline?
Not currently.
Okay, so we will hold that one under advisement. Joe Hollander's in the gallery, he will have noted that. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of questions. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Keegan. So 2 recommendations in front of us. First, to receive the memorandum, annual progress report on heritage themes in council programmes 22-3, presented to Culture and Sport Committee 28 June 23. And then the second recommendation brought forward by Councillor Hancock and tweaked slightly, that the heritage funding shortfall identified in the annual progress report on heritage themes in council programmes 22-23 for the city is referred to the 24-34 long-term plan. Is that okay, Councillor Hancock? And you're happy to move both items? I'll open that for comment. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just want to thank the officers and our many partners. And look, Linda acknowledged a whole list of them, and it's quite interesting when you see how diverse and varied they all are. And I think it's good to see Joe Hollander here from the Military Heritage Group. Look, like any minority sort of program in an LTP or council's budget, you've got to have a champion or a group of champions that lead in the space. And it's really unfortunate that heritage has just fallen away a little bit. And it's nobody's fault, and this is not a dig at anybody in the space. And I just want to acknowledge the really hard work that the library are doing and our external partners. But we used to lead in this space. We had the Ian Matheson Archives. We've had a fantastic Heritage Trust, which has, been set up many decades ago. But we just don't seem to be joining the dots on some stuff. Councillor Hancock just acknowledged there's some significant gaps. And, there's no heritage planner. The archivist is vacant. The archive space is not fit for purpose. The list could go on and on and on, so I won't bore you with that. But look, it's how we realign, it was called the Heritage Fort, and how we do that. Give you an example, Heritage New Zealand CE, Andrew Coleman came and visited just recently, and he met with myself and some of the officers, and he actually stated that the city had such a rich heritage. We were talking about the Wanganuis, the Omarus, which have a lot of built heritage. He actually said we had significantly more. We just don't profile it, and in some cases we don't protect it either. So we've got to do a bit more. And how do we fix this? Well, first of all, I think we realign the planning fort unit to try and get a part-time heritage planner on the staff. And I don't think that's extra budget. I think it's just changing the recruitment ad. But we need to perhaps talk to the CE about how that's done. We also, we haven't had a heritage planner for a number of years, and it's starting to show. So we need to look at a centralised archive, and look, we've had this same discussion with Te Manawa and a whole lot of others, some of our external museums. There's no real archive space or storage space. Now, MWLAS has a central archives, and we should be seriously looking at that. We should be looking to our externals. This has got a lot of dollars on it, and I am supportive, but actually, the Heritage Trust was set up many decades ago. It does a great job, but its stuff is quite narrow. You look to others, and I go to a city much smaller than us, just to the west. Wanganui has a Heritage Trust, and the council puts in very, very little. It is all externally funded, and volunteers are involved, and they really get stuck in. And the Deputy Mayor just showed me what they were doing with the museum there as well, with some of her whānau, extended whānau contributing there. So look, I do think we can do more in this space. I want to acknowledge what has been done and commend the team for really holding up the Heritage Fort really well, especially the library team, done a magnificent job around Local History Week, which then went into overdrive into Heritage Month. And that was really great to be part of personally as well. And I just would like us to do a little bit more in this space, and I think we owe that to our past and our forefathers and foremothers. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And I won't repeat everything the Mayor has just said, but I guess the second recommendation there is really, when I actually looked at the report and I looked through Section 5, the gaps and the barriers to me looked very concerning. So I think that we, as elected members, we are the custodians, I guess, of our heritage for the time being that we are elected members. So we need to make sure that we actually understand the size, the risk, the options and the solutions to try and resolve this, to make sure that we don't get to a situation when it's gone, it's gone. So I just hope that everybody just supports that, and the LTP should paint a more knowing picture of what we face. Thank you.
Thank you. I've read those out, so I won't do that again. I will ask you to vote. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you. It's my intention to take items 12, 13 and 14 together. So they are all presented by Sarah Claridge, our Democracy and Governance Advisor. This is the final presentation of the final statements of intent for our CCOs. So my thinking in putting these together and treating these as procedural at this stage is that we've had the draft in front of us, we've had opportunities to ask questions, to put those back to the CCOs, to have their thoughts brought back into their final statements of intent. The option is still with you, elected members, to make any changes or to vote not to receive the statement of intent, but at this stage that is mostly procedural. Over to you, Sarah.
Kia ora koutou. Happy to take all three reports as read. I'd just like to make a few corrections. There was an error in the council grant figures for the statements of intent in the Globe and the Regent. The correct figures are on the screen. So we've just asked for the two CCOs to replace these figures, or put these figures into their statement of intent before they're published. So, and there's just a minor error in the Regent's report on paragraph 1.3. It mentions the Globe Theatre. It should be read as the Regent Theatre. That's all. Happy to take any questions.
Sarah, have the CCOs been advised that there was an error in the paperwork, that those figures were incorrect?
Yes, they have, and they've submitted new statement of intents.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question through you to decide where it should go. On page 80 in Te Manawa's statement of intent, it talks about the additional 250,000 that the council allocated, stating that it was allocated 230,000 toward operating expenditure and 20,000 toward capital expenditure. Looking at what they presented us in the annual budget process, that was not what we were funding. It appeared to me primarily funding capital programs, but some mix of both. I just wonder if we could get a comment perhaps from accounting or finance from whether or not $60,000 for 6 new specialised object cases would be classed as operational, or if they haven't allocated the money where they said they were going to.
Afternoon, Scott Mance, Finance Manager. My assumption would be yes, they should be capital expenditure. However, that would be for the CCO to decide.
Which is a shame they're not here. I'm just trying to get an understanding of, because we've now had 3 different things they've told us they're going to spend that $250,000 on. I'm trying to make sure that what they are spending it on is what we've approved, and I don't know how I do that without them here.
So you've raised an absolutely valid point. I suggest we take that offline to raise with the CCO, and
thank you.
I will look at a member of staff who will nod at me to say that will happen. Yes, thank you, Steph. We'll take that up with them to make sure that's properly accounted for and link into our accounting people if needs be. Any further questions? Being none, you're off the hook there, Sarah. Thank you. Righto, that means that we will take all 3 of the recommendations from the 3 reports together to agree the final statement of intent for Te Manawa Museums Trust Board, for the Regent Theatre Trust Board as amended, and for the Globe Theatre Trust Board as amended. So their final statements of intent for 2023-2026. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Open for any comments. There being none, we'll look for a vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We will move to the next item, which is our committee work schedule. Are there any comments on that, Chris?
No comments, but happy to take any questions.
I just note that we've removed the sighting of the Chinese garden off our work schedule. That's going to come through the LTP process. No other substantive changes there. No questions. So I will move that we receive the work schedule, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Ask you to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. I feel like I'm channeling former Councillor Adrian Broad in the amount of unanimous voting there has been today. So if I close us out with karakia. Kia putu ki te whaio, ki te au marama, whakamoa ki a tina, homie, huie, tai kie. Thank you all for your good work today. We will take a 15-minute break or so, back in here at 10 to go back to the Mayor and Council.